So we're big, we're bad, and we're back for part 2 of The Gallery mixed with Warren. Download the multi-tracks. Please hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to leave me some comments and questions below. All that good stuff. Download those multi-tracks and follow along in part 2 of Mixing the Gallery's Young and Restless. We've got just me playing bass, just a DI bass going into trashy bass sound, just my jazz bass, an L1, because look at the peaks on the DI. As you remember when I was talking about this was recorded as the demo and then became the master. So quite often you just pick up an instrument, you plug it in and you start playing. And as you can tell, what I played there is I played the same rhythm that I was playing on the electric guitar and eventually the acoustic guitar, but look at it, the transients are insane. I mean, it's like, they're ridiculous because there's no compression going on in it. So what am I doing? I'm just slapping an L1 limiter across it. I'm also putting an auto tune on it because I'm banging it so hard I'm knocking it in and out of tune. Take that off. Back on. You see it's flattening the note more often than not because when I play super hard, and it happens a lot on bass, you play super hard, the string moves a long way. So when it's moving this way, it's going sharp. So I've even had piano players play so hard that they knock the piano string slightly sharp. Believe it or not, it has happened. It happened with Isaac from the Fray. He would knock pianos out of tune. And strangely enough, with his left hand playing octaves like this. So strings bend. As you know, when you hit them, of course, they bend slightly, and that can create, some beauty. But when they go a long way, like I'm playing with this bass, I had to put a tune on it. If you look at here, quite often it's going a long way, and then other times I've tuned it flat, so it's going sharp. But it's mainly to do with my playing. Next up is Sans Amp. Take it off. Pretty horrible. Just a DI. I'm sure that's a generic DI bass tone that any of you could get. Just plug it in front of your I/O. It's not award-winning, it's not anything. But what it is when you put a Sans amp on it, you get some really good aggression. Next up, little cut at 350 and also high pass at 70, so it's out of the way of the kick. So kick, tambourine, live drum, loops and stomps. Stomps of hand claps. So now you're starting to get the picture. I think that was a little acoustic. It's just a 3/4 size acoustic with probably a Lewitt LCT 340 on it. High pass going at 150, gentle though, not sharp. And then look, you can hear the R comp on it. Again, generic default settings on the attack and release. Take it off. Press it back on. Just controls it, keeps it tight. Now, an interesting thing to know on the tambourine, which I neglected to say a second ago, is I always pan the tambourine opposite the hi-hat. Because if the drummer's laying down a groove, and I like to pan, you don't have to, but I like to pan my hi-hat to the audience perspective, then I want my tambourine to balance it out by being the same balance on the other side. Therefore, I get this tambourine and hi-hat moving against each other. So I've got 60 on the right for the hi-hat and about 60 on the left for the tambourine. So there's all elements so far. That's just a Logic keyboard patch, playing the chords. Just, I like it because it reminds me of The Who, Won't Get Fooled Again. It's just, you just basically, in Logic, you just play the chord and you have the tempo in there and it makes the tremolo time perfectly with the tempo of the song. And the tempo of this song was 83 BPM. If you want to try any delay effects or whatever, 83 BPM is it. So we're almost there with the basic elements. Next up is me playing telly. And there's a pair of them. Now I printed a clean DI and an amp tone. It's a perfect mirror of the acoustic and the bass. They're all playing the same thing. Now you will notice I am not doing anything additional to it. It's the way I recorded it. Now it's not always the case. There's other mixes I've done, plenty of stuff you can see of me online where I've EQ'd, you know, really heavily. But I recorded it the way I want to hear it. Now, David may completely manipulate and do other stuff with that. And also, because there's a DI, a clean DI track in there, you can manipulate it. You could put Sounds Amp on it, you could put any virtual amp you like on it and do whatever you want to it. But that essentially is just the amp tone. Next up, there's actually a decapitator on one of these halves because it just wasn't driven that hard. Without. Just an extra grit. See, the tone's set to bright here, and there's a little bit more drive. Doubled. And with a harmony added. Starts off unison. Goes to harmony. If we go to the other side, and what I did over the other side is I did this arpeggio part. Now, what you'll notice I did on this is I took this side and added some extra distortion with the Sounds Amp, and I put an H delay on it, and that gave me some stereo width because I panned them opposite each other, and then there's one down the middle. And it's just a really light, low octave together. So, here's all my guitars. So it's a lot of guitars, but it's just about the balance. Go, adding some percussion. So what's missing? Two more things. The lead part. It's printed the way I want to hear it. So all those effects are on the guitar. See, the reverb, the delay. And the only other thing that's happening on this intro is the actual intro where I built these little woes. And added an explosion. So this little whoa is actually from later in the song. It's heavily EQ'd. Using isotopes, take the isotope off. With it on. The thing about isotopes is it just gives you that trashy, vinyl sound. It's great. It's a great, cool, fun way to add noise, EQ things dramatically, so when that downbeat comes in, it's more powerful. I also then printed the stomp and used isotope again. So that's a stomp, just bust to a stereo file and printed. Then with isotope on it. Great. Both of them have a little sound toys, crystallizer on it, which just detunes it, makes it feel a little bit more warbly, so you have that kind of vinyl, trashy old vinyl, plus a little bit of detuning just to make it sound like maybe the record's warped even. It just twists it up. And then some reverse effects. And then a downbeat explosion here. And I just took out the super lows because we've got so much kick going on down there and stomps and everything. We do not need the low lows on there. So essentially it's just like the cymbal and just kind of adds this kind of energy. So there you go. That is the whole intro of the song. Now on our master bus, we are printing through, we came back out of the console and we're printing through some fun stuff. So what I've got here is I've got this linear phase EQ, just getting rid of the super, super lows. Again. So that's the super, super lows. 30 and below has just gone. It doesn't need to be there. Just interferes with our mix. I've also got an SSL bus compressor. Getting about 2, sometimes 3 dB, mainly 2 dB is worth the game with actually. And then on the very end, an L2. It's not doing much at the moment, but it's leveling out. It's coming out of the console, going into a print bus, and then printing to a separate track down here through these effects on our print bus, which is just, all I'm doing on the EQ is just taking out the super lows, using some SSL compression, and then some very light limiting. If I take all this off, back on. A lot of it's gain makeup. It's just making up the gain. Obviously this cleans up our mix because it's taking out super, super lows, which will just muddy in our mix. Secondly, the compressor here is making up a lot of gain. It's probably making up a dB more than I'm reducing it by. And then the L2 making up a little extra gain here. The thing about the way that these L2s work, to be honest, is like you don't need to do that much actual gain reduction. Just by bringing this threshold down, you really suck up the energy of the mix. It's pretty amazing what it does. Because if you look at it, it doesn't look to be doing any attenuation at all. Put it on. Pretty amazing what it's doing. The L2, I'll be honest, is a tool I love a lot. Now there'll be a lot of conjecture. A lot of people will disagree with me on this. I think used gently, it's a really wonderful tool, and sometimes I use it aggressively and sometimes I don't. I do believe it's great. In almost every mastering engineer's place I've ever been to, they have a hardware version of the L2. They just do. Doesn't matter who they are, whether big or small, they all have an L2. It's a pretty remarkable limiter. Okay, so that is everything coming up to our first verse. So let's listen to it through the first verse.
About me is we keep on keeping on when life gets hard. You gotta have strength and you gotta have pride, man. You gotta keep faith when they're telling you lies. You gotta keep on keeping on when life gets hard.
So let's check out our first verse. Now, the stomp is going through. Our tambourine is going through, but a lot of stuff is being muted. At the very first, look what I've done.
Love and the thing about peace, the thing about hope, and the thing about me.
So, the main kick and snare on the live kit and its samples have been muted. And we're just letting the basic groove and the stomps come in.
Gets hard. You gotta have strength and you gotta have.
And then the live snare comes in and announces itself back in and adds the drums.
Life gets hard. You gotta have strength and you gotta have pride, man. You gotta keep faith when they're telling you lies. You gotta keep on keeping on.
I see that, but don't get. I just added that because it didn't feel good. So I built that groove after the fact.
Life gets hard.
The edits.
You gotta have strength and you gotta have pride, man. You gotta keep faith when they're telling you.
You can hear it because if you solo the hi-hat, see there's no snare bleed where that would be. So sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. You can't be afraid. You'll notice when you get a lot of sessions from people, they do what's necessary. You know, is that going to be the, should I have gone in there and recut the drums with him playing that groove? Yeah, you know, maybe. But it felt like that was the groove that needed to play there. And so I just built the groove with the snare afterwards. So the room mics don't pick it up like that. The ribbon, the crush mic, and the hi-hat, etc. But it sounds cool. You know.
Life gets hard. You gotta have strength and you gotta have pride, man. You gotta keep faith when they're telling you lies. You gotta keep
very minimal amount of instruments here.
When life gets hard.
Cool. So you see, it's really about muting there. Let's just go back through the mix again. Got the full live drums, but we're muting all of the samples, all of the live kick, all of the live snare, and just keeping the hi-hat and the ribbon and the crush mic against our stomps, and one just our beatbox.
The thing about hope and the thing about
and
me.
Our main iMachine. So those are the main things that are playing. You'll notice, if I hadn't mentioned it before, but you'll notice our loops are going through our drum bus as well. So they get that additional kind of parallel effect as well. Here's without, here's with the parallel. Without, with. So, all of my loops, all of my live drums, all of my kick and snare samples are going back through that. I hope you're enjoying this. Please don't forget to download the multi-tracks. They're free for you. You can download this course and follow along. And of course, hit the subscribe button. Next up is the chorus is the next biggest change, and that's where different instrumentation comes in. So we have a tambourine going, we have our bass line playing it, we have our acoustic guitar. The blippity blops changes the parts somewhat. It's following the chords. In comes this other synth. Following, it's a continuous version of the bass line, acoustics, not doing any EQ to that bass sound at all. People ask me a lot about mixing stock virtual sounds. A lot of the time with the virtual sounds, these people are very smart in Logic and even in Pro Tools and other DAWs. They're very smart and they're building sounds that work with other sounds. So if they're giving you a bassline sound, 99% of the time, not all the time, but very often, it has been shaped to work perfectly as a bass sound. You know, they do a lot of work for you these days. So I don't end up doing a lot of EQ unless I really need to. Now, so with this bass synth, I am doing a little bit of work to it. I'm just using a multiband to just control it. It's compressing the super lows like 90 and below a little harder, just to get it out of the way of everything else. With that synth, here's my live bass. Together. Cool. On the second half of this verse, essentially the pre-chorus is where the live drums come in, the bass comes in as we're talking about. Also is this little synth sound here. It's just a reverse synth with the bass. So it's just like another little addition all together with the tracks.
Strength and you gotta have pride, man. You gotta keep faith when they're telling you lies. You gotta keep on keeping on when life gets hard.
Cool. Okay, so important things to note are vocal sound. Now, quite often I'll do loads and loads of processing to it, especially when I'm doing a big pop track. But this, I'm hitting the console, this little summing console down here, pretty hard. It's doing a lot of work for us. So I'm using Decapitator to shape my vocal sound.
The thing about love and the thing about peace, the thing about hope and the thing about me,
I'm brightening from here.
Is we keep on keeping
And then I'm using
on when
smashing
life
it with an
gets
1176.
hard. You gotta have strength and you gotta have pride, man. You gotta keep
Really
faith.
dynamic. Now put it back on.
The thing about love and the thing about peace, the thing about hope and the thing about me,
Back on.
is we keep on keeping on when life gets.
So it's pretty aggressive. I mean, it's kind of a quick, be honest, a quick, lazy way of mixing the vocal. But as I said, this song came about with it being written and recorded as we were going. You know, I was adding guitars, adding a keyboard part, putting the drums down, you know, all starting essentially from a loop. And so there's some fun stuff going on, but essentially not a lot going on in the vocal. You know, and I'm going through a stereo channel here because there's a whole bunch of gang vocals about to come in on the chorus, but the vocal is doing I'm doing very little to the vocal. Just the decapitator, but I'm slamming the heck out of it with an 1176 plugin. So I'm letting the Cadac do a lot of work because I'm hitting it super hard, it's got transformers in it. This is one of those instances where the quote-unquote summing mixer is doing a lot of work in a way that I find pleasing. Now, There's a lot of summing, hi-fi summing mixers out there. I'm not a fan of them, I'll be honest. I feel like if I'm going to sum, I want it to be colored. I want it to add distortion. I want it to add transformers. I want a lot of wrongness going on. Otherwise, I'm just going to mix in a box, and I'm going to use some really cool plugins. Andrew Shep's mixes in a box, and he has some really cool transformer-based sounding and tape saturation plugins. You can just use those. And to be honest, they're more controllable. I can do more subtlety with it than just buying a $3,000 generic summing mixer. That to me does not seem like a good use of my money. But if I am going to do something like I am here, where I'm taking a quote-unquote pop song, and my version of this pop song is to dirty it up and make it more like a rock and roll band playing it, that's why I like using the Kodak. Now, each to their own, but that works for me, and that's the reason why I'm using it. So you'll find that this vocal is doing, I'm not doing a lot to it. It's just really just hitting the console.
The thing about love and the thing about
and there's
peace,
no
the thing
effects
about hope
in the verses
and the thing
at
about
all.
me is we keep on keeping on
Dry as a bone.
when life gets hard.
However, when the chorus comes in, it's a whole different thing.
We are the young and restless. Together no one can stand against us. We are
A lot of
the
vocals.
young and restless. We are one.
We're using our friend Cross-Sword Algae's plugin. Pretty tasty. Take it off.
We are the young and restless. Together no one can stand against us. We are the young and restless. We are.
It's a pretty tasty plugin when you're doing things like this. You've got a lot of vocals, because this is me, my old engineer, and the singer going into a room. Like you can see, it says W and Phil and gang with three of us, and we're singing harmonies and everything.
We are the young and restless. Together no one.
Pretty remarkable what it's doing. So let's just listen down and you'll see all the parts. There's a lot. Now, you could bounce this to a stereo. You don't have to do it all separately.
We are the young and restless. Together no one can stand against us. We are the young and restless. We are one. We are the young and restless. Together no one can stand against us. We are the young and restless. We are one.
So that's the lead singer doing a harmony, a third and fifth.
We are the young and restless. Together no one can stand against us.
That's three of us together.
We are the young and restless. We are one. We are the young and restless. Together no one can stand against us. We are the young and restless. We are one.
So that's the main vocal, just a gang vocal, three of us.
Whoa, whoa.
Now, highs.
The young and restless, together no one can stand against us. We are the young and restless. We are one.
Sounds like emo music.
We are the young and restless, together no one can stand against us. We are the young and restless. We are one. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
So these are the low gang vocals.
We are the young and restless. Together no one can stand against us. We are the young and restless. We are one.
This is all of us just doing it.
We are the young and restless. Together no one can stand against us.
So that's most of the vocals that. Put them all together.
Young and restless. We are one.
Then we add in Chris's plugin.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
The pitch is the same. Hasn't been turned on. The delay effect is on.
We are the young and restless. Together no one can stand against us. We are the young and restless. We are one.
So what we've done is we've got a little bit of bass boost, a lot of treble boost, some compression spank.
We are the young and restless. Together no one can stand against
Take that
us.
off. Makes a huge difference.
The young and restless. We are
Treble.
one.
Off.
We
Dark.
are the young and restless. Together no one can stand against us. We
With no bottom end.
the young and restless. We are one.
So look, this is a nifty plugin. It's particularly useful on background vocals. I've got to be honest, it's especially when it comes to gang vocals, because what I'm doing here is I've got a lot of vocals and they're all going to this stereo plugin. And we got this from Chris. It sounds fantastic. I really like it. Shout out for making something quick and easy that does the job. But I particularly like it on gang vocals. I wouldn't necessarily use it on a stereo pair of BVs. You've seen me use other things. But on a gang vocal, it's a quick and easy fix. It does wonderful things because it does quick EQ where he's taking mids and highs. He's making very, very generic kind of ideas that work. And it's gluing together all of his backgrounds. Just listen.
We are the young and restless. Together no one can stand against us.
So shout out to Chris for making this. No pitch change on it, but you could put it in.
We are the young and restless. Together no one
You could
can
widen it,
stand against us.
and then there's some verb and some delays.
We are one.
So great plugin. Really, really fantastic plugin. For this specific thing, for a gang vocal, I don't think there's a better plugin on the market. Look at the quick, easy fix. It's just on and off.
We are the young and restless. Together no one can stand against us.
I mean, you know, the other great thing is like you heard them isolated. They're not all perfect. They're not all exactly in tune. There's some lines here where I or Phil or Brendan stop singing. And they still work. Sometimes we missed a lyric, whatever, but together.
We are the young and restless. Together no one
It just
can stand
sounds huge.
against us.
And it gives us that energy that really, really brings that chorus forward. So, and then of course, you know, throw it into the track and you get this.
Together no one can stand against us. We are the young and restless.
Then we go back to the re-intro. Cool. Thank you. I've hoped you've enjoyed part 2 of this. Remember, there is a part 1. There'll be a link where you can get to part 1. Also, I hope you've enjoyed Boxing Day. This is Boxing Day in England, and I think also in Canada and Australia and New Zealand and many other places in the world. So happy Boxing Day. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to download the multi-tracks and come back tomorrow for part 3 of The Gallery, Young and Restless.